Good morning and welcome to the Mindful Messenger Show, brought to you by the Liberty Beacon Media Project. My name is Amanda Johnson, and today we're talking to Laura Gabbard about mindful caregiving. After helping her husband beat the odds and astound doctors with 5 years of life beyond what they predicted, Laura knew that she had to share the secrets of her success with caregivers and others who had suffered a loss or health crisis. She took a year to fully grieve, shared the intimate details of their amazing journey in the book, The Toughest One, and then bought a ranch in Washington and launched ReBoot Ranch Retreat, a place where others can reboot their health, reclaim their creativity and purpose, and reset their life with the cognitive and behavioral tools that sustained her and Reid, her husband, through their difficult journey with the help of her horses. Laura is a visionary with a knack for creatively solving relationship problems and health issues. She's also an artist, published illustrator, and writer, and has a fondness for painting cowboy boots, which she says is surprisingly very therapeutic. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
I'm really happy you're here too, and I appreciate the fact that you're here even more than most of my guests, because this is the second time we've recorded this. The technology was not our friend last week, so I appreciate your commitment to sharing your message on this platform and helping our audience figure out what mindful caregiving really is. And what I love about your story is that, you know, it's so powerful. I mean, first of all, you kept them alive for 5 years beyond what they said. That's amazing. But also, you know, as with most messengers, there's like, here's all the stuff that I did great, and then here's all the stuff that I wish I'd done a little bit better or a lot better. And you were really real about that in your book, and I'm excited to share that with the audience today. So I'd love to know kind of where this whole idea for writing the book started. Like, what was it about writing a book that really drew you to the process?
Well, Reid was the writer in the family. I was the artist, and they never ever thought I would be a writer. But during the process where I was looking for things to excite him, keep him motivated, I was encouraging him to write. And writing this book was just inspired during that period. And I thought, well, how cool would it be to write a book that kind of shows his side and my side, because I could see that I was looking at things from a very different perspective than he was. And so we started, I threw the idea at him, and he liked it. So then I realized that, you know, I couldn't help him do his part, and I didn't want to influence his part. So we found you just by luck, by suggestion from a person who knew a person who knew you, and recruited you to help him start writing the book. And then it was going, you know, pretty well for a while, and then, you know, he couldn't finish it. So I didn't know if I was going to finish it after he died, but I was strongly encouraged to finish it. It has changed from the original quite a bit, but I guess I am a writer, according to you. I am a writer. So, and it was, you know, and it's been a great process. I really loved it. I'm working on a second book.
Yeah. So I think that's really important because, you know, one of the things that I see with messengers is that they get this idea about writing for whatever reason. Sometimes it's go to change the world. In your case, like help motivate Reid to, you know, keep using his mind, keep using his talent, get excited about something that kept him excited. And so then we have this idea or the structure that we see for the book. And originally, like you said, yours, I thought it was such a cool idea because you're going to write this whole journey from diagnosis to where you guys were at that moment, which was really a pretty good spot to be. I mean, he was doing really well and, kind of surprising the doctors with how well he was doing. And then things change and the book has to be adjusted, And so I remember that first conversation of like, okay, originally he was going to write one half and you were going to write the other, and we were going to figure out how to weave it together so that it was this, whole perspective of what it's like to go through something like this. But then when he couldn't do it anymore because his cognitive ability and then he passed, it was like, well, now what? I mean, we kind of went back to the drawing board and started over. And
Exactly.
that was hard. I mean, it was hard to like imagine how can we, we tried really hard to figure out where to include some of his writing and some of his ideas because that was still really important, but it kind of became like your baby, like you're going to help and what was your vision going to be. And so you had to like kind of own that whole process. And so that's when we brought the horses in. So I would love for you to share kind of like this idea of the horses, because as they'll see on the website, the book cover is beautiful. It's like you and Reid on horses, against a sunset. And the horse is like this really important part of your journey as an individual, but also your journey with him. So can you share a little bit about the importance of the horses to you?
Yeah. Well, going back to just briefly about the change, it was really hard because I saw that book, the original idea, so clearly. And then after he died, I lost everything. I didn't have a picture at all how the book was going to be until we had our meeting, and you kind of helped me see how we could, the connections that I hadn't seen because I was so close to it. Well, the horses have been a big part of my life ever since I was little. I mean, I've never lived a day without them in my life. And so they have been some of my greatest teachers and my greatest friends, and I've learned so much from them. And when I realized that one in particular, Jack, we had gone through a similar situation, health crisis prior to Reid getting sick. It was so close. I mean, it was almost exactly how Reid's crisis was. It was just shorter, and it was, the details were different, but it was so similar that I was amazed to see how, it was kind of like a practice, for the big one. I'd already, it's like I've already done this. I mean, not this big, but I've already done this. And I remember I talked to them the same way. I did a lot of the same things, and Reid and Jack were so much alike anyway that it was just amazing to me that how that all worked. And so it was really fun for me to get to include Jack's story running parallel with Reid's, and to include the horse stories because I know that they really helped prepare me, for all of this. And so, and of course I could talk about horses all day long, and I mean, they're just something that I really love. So it was really fun to get to include them in the book.
Yeah. I mean, when I started to hear that, you were raised with them and that you had not only trained them, but you had trained other like kids how to ride them and overcome their fears, and like it was so exciting to me because I thought, geez, this is really what prepared you to face all of the, I mean, what do they say about horses, right? The horse can sense your fear. So you have to overcome
Mhm.
that before you approach the horse, right? Like there's that whole, and so the parallels just started to come together as far as what Reid had to face going through the process and how you coached him through that entire process from diagnosis until the end. And I just thought it was such a beautiful, I mean, stories about, how to train. And I mean, even down to like the first part about, when you talk about in the first area of like assessing and being able to look at a horse and kind of figure out like the horse is having a bad day, and to your trained eyes, you can see that because you've been around enough of them. So I just keep thinking like, how did that's all I could think about was like, how did that vision, that very trained vision and experience help you to kind of see what was going on with Reid even before he did? So will you share a little bit about that, about Reid's story and how that really helped you to kind of see what was going on and help get him the support that he needed?
Yeah, well, horses can't speak English. So if you're going to communicate with them, you have to learn how to read body language, and you have to learn horse language. And so I was, pretty much an expert on reading on horse language, reading body language. Human body language is a little bit different, but still, I was so observant. I mean, I was just trained. That's just how, how I am all the time. It's just, I'm always looking. I remember like in the beginning of the book, I can literally walk past a window, glance at the horses, and go back and know something's instantly wrong, just like Reid could walk in the door and I could look at him for a second and know something's wrong before he says anything, So I was really good at watching and observing and reading body language. And I noticed things about him that were changing, but they were so small that on their own, they weren't anything that you would say, oh man, you need a CAT scan, But afterwards, when he was diagnosed, they all made sense because added together, it was significant. And so and of course, it validated everything that I had, been noticing and seen. I just couldn't put my finger on it, And of course, he wouldn't have been agreeable to, going and getting checked either, unless he was really in severe distress. That's just how he was, which is how it happened.
Yeah. Yeah. And so then you guys go, you get the CAT scan, they say it's a brain tumor, and then what? Like, how do you navigate a situation like that? I mean, that's just about as scary as being with a horse that is getting ready to lose control. I imagine. Like, how do you get yourself together?
Well, I remember when you asked me that question, and you said, we sat across the table, and you said, what did you do when the doctor walked in and told you Reid had a brain tumor? And I was like, what did you mean? What did I do? He said, what happened? Did you freak out? And I said, no, I didn't freak out. He was freaking out. I couldn't freak out, She said, well, is that harder? You said, was that harder than dealing with a horse who's freaking out? And I said, no, it wasn't. I mean, when you have a 1,200-pound animal who is crashing into fences and throwing themselves around, and you can't get close enough with the needle to even get them any relief, I mean, that's traumatic. That's scary. That's really, really hard to deal with. And I've done that many, many times. I've had to deal with horses who were out of control, and they were in so much pain that you could not, you couldn't get close enough to help them. And yeah, that's a lot harder than, dealing with a person who's out of control. So I had a lot of experience with, really tough situations. This was really, the harder part was after the surgery, when he says, okay, you're going to die. I mean, I know you can survive brain tumor. You can survive, brain tumor doesn't mean you're going to die. So the initial, diagnosis was, well, my grandmother had a brain tumor, took it out. She was fine, So it just, I remember telling myself, it just, things started making more sense. His behavior started making more sense after they told us that he had a brain tumor.
Yeah. Yeah, so they did a surgery, and then you guys had to make some tough decisions. And I think that this is really where this, not just your decision, but actually like the way that you approach the decision-making process with him is so powerful that I really think that it's part of why you guys got the results that you did, like why he was able to live as long as he was. So can you share a little bit about that whole process and what you were being offered in the way of treatments and everything with him?
Yeah, well, after the surgery, the surgeon came out and said, like, it was hard to, he had been so optimistic in the beginning. Like, I'm pretty sure it's benign, we'll just get it out. But when he came out and he said it was a glioblastoma stage 4, I didn't even know what that meant. I'd never heard of that before. What I did hear was 3 to 6 months without treatment, possibly a year with chemo and radiation. So it was terminal. I mean, he told us that Reid didn't have much time. So, of course, Reid didn't really understand that. He knew it was serious, but he couldn't, and we certainly never told him that he only had months to live, because I knew that would be a huge mistake. He would just count the days, because that's kind of how he was. So he knew he was in trouble, and the doctors basically told him, we don't have a cure for you. They didn't really say, you're going to die, but we don't have a cure for you. We can buy you some more time. And he just, he was really scared, and he wanted something to happen. He wanted to get treatment, and even, they wanted to start chemo and radiation as soon as his scar was healed enough. He couldn't wait to get started on that treatment because he needed to be doing something. He couldn't, sitting around and waiting was just like torture. So we did go through that first process. I mean, we were kind of swept up into it. That's all they could offer us, really. But it didn't, I mean, it scared me because I'd already been through chemo before, and it was really, really bad. And I knew that it would be really hard for me to deal with him if he had to suffer through what I did, because he wasn't as tough as me, but in that way. But but he did, he did get through the chemo and radiation pretty well, but it didn't do as much as they hoped it would, and I remember the radiologist telling us, if I were you, I would look at all of your options. And I was already bent, the alternative naturopathic way anyway with the horses, but and I'd been researching, alternatives and things, because they said, we can't cure you. We can't cure you. They did not have anything, a cure for this tumor. But I knew that you always have choices, and that there was something out there that was better than just buying him a few months. There had to be, and I had to find it. I knew it was, but he was never he was never on the wagon of, alternative treatments. He always fought me. He always resisted very strongly. So, my sister actually ran across the doctor that we ended up going with. She was the one who got us in contact with her, and that meant we would have to travel to Salt Lake. But she was the only person that told us that she could help, that she could help us. And we saw so many doctors, and they're all saying the same thing: we can't help you, we can't cure you, we can't. And she said, I think I can help you. She's the only one that gave him hope, and so he just, of course, he was just sold, that first meeting, talking with her, because she believed that he could get better, and he needed somebody to believe in him, and he needed somebody else besides me to tell him that, there's other things that could work. So that's kind of how we ended up going, alternative, which was a good decision, but I couldn't make that decision for him. And he wanted me to. He said, just tell me what to do, because he knew that I was not liking the chemo and radiation. He knew that. And he said, just tell me what to do, because he was so scared and so insecure. And I said, honey, I can't do that. It's your life, and you have to own your decision. You have to be responsible for it. I can't do that, because if I convince you to do something and you die, I have to live with that. It's your life, and you need to make the decision. I know it's really, really hard, but I can't do it for you. And I wanted to do it for him. I did, but I knew I couldn't.
Yeah.
So I just had to get him in front of the right person, and then let him, own it.
I love that. It's like, I'm sure that it's the same way with, because I was caregiving my grandmother for many years, and that was one of those things that was always tricky, right? Because when someone's cognitive abilities are decreasing, she had dementia, and I know that with all the surgeries, brain's cognitive capacity was being reduced significantly. There is always that stress of like, is this person capable of making this decision for themselves? And that stress of, as the person helping to make the decisions, how do you like really let go and let them make the decision and not even try to influence it? There were some things that the doctors wanted her to do that I was just like, oh no, and it was like, but it's not my body, it's not my mind, it's, it's definitely going to impact me. Hello. But, I think that's so powerful, because in order for him to get better, he had to have that ownership of his own power. So if you made the decision, but then the doctor gave him all of this stuff to do, would he have really owned that, for you to put all that power back in his hands and say, like, this is your life, man. You're going to make the decision. You're going to do all the things the doctor wants to do. I'm here to support you in all the ways that I can, but I can't make you get up and drink this juice or, all the stuff that he had to do. So
Exactly. And that takes me back to the horses. It's like, when you have a horse that, you have an animal basically that's so much stronger, so much bigger, so much heavier, so much faster than you are. You have to get them to own their choices. And if their choice is to stay with you and do what you ask, because that's safe for them, that's what that feels good to them, there's nothing that can tear them away from that. I mean, you don't even need a rope to keep them with you. But if they don't want to stay with you, there's no rope strong enough to keep them with you. You know, it's you got to get their mind. And I knew Reid was very hard-headed. He was very stubborn, and he was very opinionated about certain things. And I knew that there was nothing he couldn't do if he put his mind to it. But I also knew if he fought me the whole way, there was nothing I could do to make it happen for him. I needed to have his mind I needed him to make the choice, own it, and feel empowered by his choice, feel good about it, feel hopeful and believe that it could work,
Yeah.
And it did, but the doctor's the one that actually won him over, just by her approach.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just, I remember sitting there watching the change take place in him, because he went kind of begrudgingly. We were on vacation. He didn't really want to see a doctor, he didn't want to be there. But I watched him change as soon as she started talking to him. And it's like, he was hooked.
Mm-hmm.
He was hooked.
Yeah. There's nothing like that.
I know. And it was so wonderful. And I just like, phew,
Yeah.
thank you.
There's nothing like the experience of having someone see something for you that you wish you could see for yourself, but you can't quite, and to have that person be an expert who actually had tools, like that's a whole other level of, like a person being able to jump into a process. So let's talk about that, because, this holistic approach was no joke as far as what the doctor asked you guys to do and required of him. So I'd love for you to share some of that, as far as like what were some of the treatments that she prescribed, but also how were you kind of filling in the gaps, with what you knew about the horses?
Well, the first thing she told him was, I want you to believe you're already healed. So she went right straight to his mind, first thing, just like I did, and it was really uncanny, because the more I got to know her, the more we were so alike, and we just got each other, so it was kind of like Reid would accuse me of, being in cahoots with the doctor, because, we were always on the same page, her and I. So she could trust me to do what she needed when she wasn't there, and I knew where she was coming from. I knew when she said something that I could do it. I knew what she meant. I understood her. It was a really great relationship that I had with her too. But the first thing she said, like I said, was she went to his mind first. Okay, act like you're already healed. And then what she did was she told him, she said, your body already knows how to fight cancer. It does it every day. We all do it every day. We've got things coming at us all the time. Hundreds of times a day we're exposed to things that could cause cancer, and yet our bodies know what to do with that. It's only when they get to the point where they're so stressed, they're chemically out of balance, or they're so toxic that they are weak. They're weak, and cancer just gets a foothold and starts taking over. So her approach was, first, we got to clean house. We got to detox, clean house. That meant diet. She treated him that way. She put him, through the whole, a whole IV program of detox, and the diet was tough, because Reid that was probably part of the, the causes of the tumor that were feeding the tumor anyway, was because his diet was bad, and because he had a sweet tooth. And so the diet was a really big part. And once we got his house, his vessel cleaned out, then she started rebuilding and providing his body with what it needed to actually get back into cancer fighting form. So she would check him, test him every way, energetically, nutritionally, she could check all of these things and see where he was when we were down there, and then she'd adjust her program accordingly. So her approach was to clean the house, then give the body what it needed to rebuild and get itself back in shape. So we had to eliminate everything, and I had to purge the house of anything chemical, toxic, laundry soap, shampoo, toothpaste. I mean, you can't believe the stuff that can actually be contributed. We didn't have any wiggle room. We had to get rid of anything that we had control over. We had to get the fillings out of his mouth, the metal fillings out of his mouth. We had to do everything that we could think of that we had control over to help his body get, the upper hand, and get back to where it could actually start taking care of the problem. And it did. I mean, that we did get it to that point. It was amazing. And it didn't take all that long. The first year, we were kicking that tumor's butt. Mm-hmm. That first year and a half.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that just all of those things that you include in the book, I mean, people really have to pick up your book to see all the juicy details about the conversations that went on with you and him, and how you motivated him at the times where he was like, whoa, So let's talk about that a little. That piece of like how you started to see that there were kind of cycles with him, because he would really, that first year, he was, like you said, he was kicking butt. I mean, he was exercising.
Yeah.
He was doing some of his craft. He's a craftsman with wood, so he's like excited to do that. And all those little things were like contributing to this amazing possibility that he might be well. And then what happened?
Well, yeah, we had built up some momentum. The tumor was shrinking. Every CAT scan or MRI showed the tumor shrinking. The doctors were totally amazed. He was looking so good. He lost weight. He, of course, because of the diet we both had. And everybody was so amazed by him. And he was just like this superhero guy. And he even wore a Superman shirt, a lot. It was really incredible. We had momentum going. And then somehow he thought it was that he had made so much progress that he could just back off a little. And what he ended up doing was cheating on his diet over Christmas. Behind my back, of course. He didn't think it was that big of a deal. It was little things, but it was too many little things, and by the time the holiday season was over and we were back in Salt Lake she took one look at his test results and said to him, "You've been eating too many cookies." And he just, went pale. And she said, "I was going to scold your wife for not feeding you right." And he said, "No, she's been feeding me right." She said, "It's not her. It's you, isn't it?" She said, "Yes. What are you trying to do? Kill yourself?" Well, ultimately, he had lost enough ground physically. No, he didn't even feel it. He didn't even feel any different, at that point. She could see the difference. And ultimately, we never got that back. I mean, and I don't know if we could have kept the ball rolling, if it would have been something else. I don't know, but we were going so good. And then but that seemed to be kind of his pattern. I mean, it happened again. He'd really be dedicated, and he'd really work really hard and really take ownership and be 100% involved in his recovery. And then he'd just get to a point and he'd say, okay, and he'd kind of slack off a little bit and coast. But you can't coast when you can only go so far, and pretty soon you're going downhill again. And then he'd be sliding downhill. Then he wouldn't be feeling as good. Then he'd be getting scared because he's not feeling good. He started noticing all these negative things that were happening. And then he'd get scared, and then the doubts would creep in, and then he'd start to slip into depression. And I didn't know at first, the first time it happened, I didn't really realize what was happening until he really got to the point where he was depressed. Mm. And so I was able to, with the projects, sometimes I could, get him out of a slump with a project, like the book. Sometimes I could just have that talk with him and say, you know what, what do you're not sick. Stop acting like you're sick. Mm. The tumor has you have a tumor. The tumor doesn't have you, that kind of because he really never acted sick. It was just, but he could make himself sick by the way he was thinking. And then sometimes I just flat had to make him mad. I just had to say, you know what? If you're going to die, just tell me. If you want to die, just tell me, and I'll quit bugging you. I mean, really, why am I working so hard? Yeah. Just tell me. And sometimes I just have to really piss him off and get him in the fight again. And then he'd rededicate himself, and he'd work really hard, and he'd make some more progress, and then it seemed like it would happen again.
Yeah.
It was really, really hard to maintain the fight. And then pretty soon he just kind of eventually lost the fight in him, and just got tired, I guess, I mean, and I think that's really, really common. It's just, you get tired of fighting, especially if you don't believe that you're going to get where you want to be. I think he really didn't believe he could be cured all the way, not 100%, or he didn't believe he deserved to be cured. Mm. That he was good enough, or he deserved it. It could be either of those things. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing that your book makes really, really clear with this story is the power of continually using your words and your energy to bring presence and calm, and also keep directing the mind to the more positive. There was these really powerful conversations that you had with him, sometimes on the way to Salt Lake, and asking him what might you be willing to fight this hard for? What is the end that you're aiming at, that you really want? And those conversations are so, people just have to get the book and read it, because it's so beautiful. And it also gives us a way to kind of have these conversations with the people that we love, whether they're sick or not. If they're doing stuff that is just not good for them, I think this was really a powerful thing. And then the other part that I think it shows is how all the little things that you did, all the reminders, and especially the intention of putting it all back on him. in the sense of you were there to support, but it was all up to him. He was the one who had to get himself to exercise. He was the one, like, you couldn't make him do any of that. But by constantly inviting him, he actually started to own his own process. And then, you know, that I think that's why the end of the story is so powerful. And because it shows what happens when someone doesn't have all those levels of support and all those reminders that they have, you know, the ability to actually change their day, change their body, change their mind. So we share a little bit about that piece of like kind of the end of his particular story, and you know, how that kind of showed you exactly what you had done for him for all of those years with the doctor.
Well, you know, there's a pass in Washington where I've always been amazed when I go up. It doesn't look like you're going uphill until you turn around and look behind you. It's like an optical illusion. Mm-hmm. And I remember having to remind him of how much he'd done, how well he'd done, all the good things that have happened, because when he started to get, you know, scared or those doubts would creep in, and those fed each other, you know, more fear, more doubts, more fear, more doubts, you know, it was just, and once that got started, it was hard to break that. But I'd have to remind him, you know, look how far we've come. Look at all the wonderful things that have happened because you're going through this really hard thing. And I'm not saying I'm glad you have this hard thing to go through, but so many wonderful things have happened to us and to you as a result of this really awful, seemingly awful thing that happened. And I'd have to point out the silver lining, I guess, you know, in the situations and remind him. I mean, I could tell where he was by the words he used. If I was hearing a lot of, I'm so frustrated, I should be doing better than this. It shouldn't be taking this long. And I'm trying, you know, those kinds of words, they're so full of futility. And when I heard those words, I knew that he was where he was mentally. And so I kind of, you know, ultimately was more like a life coach and saying, you know, how about you know, say it this way, you know, like, I understand you're frustrated. I understand things are hard for you right now. But let's say it a different way, you know, say, because frustrating, the word frustrating it just says, everything about it says struggle. And he would also use that word, struggling. I'm struggling. Well, struggling means fighting against something that you don't believe you can win. You know, it's like it. And so either you're gonna do it or you're not gonna do it, right? There's no struggling. There's no trying. You're either going to do it or you're not going to do it. You have to make up that mind, you know, in your mind. You have to do that. You might fail. You might say, yes, I'm going to do this. And you might fail. But your mind has to say, yes, I'm going to do this. Own it. I'm going to do it. It's going to happen, you know. But this trying and struggling thing, that was a really big, you know, that was a really hard thing to overcome. And so the words were huge, and I would listen to how he talked to himself, and I would listen to how he talked about himself to other people. And I could tell, you know, I just could tell where, you know, where he was. And the rest of your question, where did you want me to go with this? So I don't get.
No, it's okay. No, I think like all of that, you know, we get towards the end of his story, and we
Oh,
start to
okay.
see how, you know, how important that was, because
Yeah, well, ultimately, I'd worked so hard to keep his environment positive. I mean, from what he ate to what was surrounding him to what he slept in to what, you know, even some of the people that he was in contact with. There were some that fed his fear and doubts, some that you know were just by their energy and their own fear. And so trying to kind of buffer that, I'd really built kind of a protective bubble around him in so many ways. And at the end, when he got into an environment where I could no longer protect him from that bubble just disappeared. It was just a short period of time, 2 weeks. And he, I mean, just in a negative environment where nobody believed he would get better. And they were talking to him about, you know, everything that he couldn't do rather than what he could do. And, you know, just the whole thing, it didn't take long for him to just succumb to that. I mean, he was tired going in, but we really did not believe, either one of us believed that him going into the hospital for stroke rehab was going to be the end. I expected him to come out of the hospital, and he didn't. I mean, it was just, and I'm not saying that the people there were bad, because they weren't. They were trying to help him. They were just doing their job. You know, they were just doing their job. But the whole environment there was so opposite from what I'd had him in before. And I wasn't enough to balance that out. I mean, I couldn't by myself balance that out. So I just watched him just ratchet down every day because of all the kind of hopeless energy. Not negative necessarily, just hopeless. You know, there was no hope there.
There was nothing like feeding the possibility. It was
there
not
was nothing feeding
not
him.
inviting him to do anything for himself anymore, like tying his shoes like you asked him to do.
The team of people, you know, surrounding him did not believe he was going to get better. Mm-hmm. They didn't. They were just going through the motions, basically.
Yeah, I really do think like at the end of the day, that's really like the core of your book is all about that belief. Like his belief, you're holding that belief for him, the doctor believing in him, and then what happens when all of that disappears, you know? And I mean, who are we to say? Everyone has their time, right? But it's just, it was uncanny to see how it all unfolded. So
how fast.
I think it's really important too that we spend a little time. We don't have a whole lot more, but I'd love for you to share like what your experience was through this as the caregiver, and more of like, how did you, I mean, obviously you had all of these tools and skills to navigate it without losing your mind, like a lot of us caregivers feel ready to do at times, right? Like, I don't know. It's so hard. It is so hard to be responsible for someone at that level who's in that much trouble. And I feel like you had so much going in that it was like an automatic type of experience for you. But I'd love for you to share kind of like what was more of the background. What are some of the things that you did for yourself or didn't do for yourself that you kind of look back and think, okay, this is where I can really help other caregivers now?
Yeah, definitely. Well, being the oldest child in my family. I've always been the take charge kind of, that's just my personality.
Okay.
So I'm one of those people who would rather just do the whole thing myself and do it right. And, I'm not very good at asking for help. And I wish that I had, there was help available to me. People offered all the time, but I was so protective of Reid and wanted things done a certain way that I was really reluctant to delegate anything. And besides, there were times when he was just so unpredictable that I didn't want to burden someone else with the responsibility of trying to decide what to do with him when he did something really, really, out there or dangerous. And so I just, I was prepared that way to just, take on this big job myself and just, do it. I didn't even hesitate. I didn't even think about it, really. That's just how I am. But I do wish that I would have taken more time, those opportunities to be by myself. And probably the biggest thing was I kind of lost my joy in life. My husband was dying, it's like I didn't really allow myself to be happy or even experience joy or pleasure much. I don't know. I didn't feel like it was fair for me to do that when he was getting, he's dying. Why should I be happy? My husband's dying, But after he died, I realized that it was probably so hard for him to watch me just, shoulder the burden of everything. It was excruciating for him to actually be a burden of any kind, because he was always the caretaker guy, taking care of everybody. And so to watch me do that for him, and I think about that too. If I was watching somebody, just use themselves up for me, I wouldn't like it either. And I wouldn't want I don't want my kids to do that for me when I get old. I don't want them to put their life on hold. I don't want them to abuse themselves and just use up all their resources just for me, have nothing left over. And he was watching me. He was not, he had issues, but he was still watching me, and I really, I could have done, if I didn't known, I maybe could have, it could have helped him stay in the game longer if he, saw me being happy and, just living life to its fullest and, despite all this. But that's kind of, if I had a regret, that would probably be it, that I didn't see that what I was doing to myself was hurting him. And because he was, he loved me so much, and he wouldn't want, he didn't want to be causing me any kind of pain or trouble or, anything like that. And I get that, I understand that. So that would probably be my.
Yeah. What were some of the things that you wish you had done? Like, it's, there's a lot of talk at Caregivers about taking care of yourself, and about, like, there's a lot of that conversation because caregivers are so burnt out,
Mm-hmm.
So how,
yeah.
But for me, I think it's really important that we talk about, like, the details of what does it mean to take care of yourself? Like, you were eating pretty good because you had to prepare for your day, right?
I was on the same diet he was.
What were some of the things that you wish you had done that weren't even like, I need to go on a vacation for a week? Like, not like that, but like the daily things. What are the things that you could have done that would have nourished you through the process?
Well, I didn't let myself spend any time with the horses. That was probably the biggest thing, is I they've always been there for me. They've always been my therapy my whole life. And it's just like, I just didn't make time for them. And that's probably the biggest thing. And the other was just to have some time alone, you know, where you just can kind of let go of all the responsibilities and stuff, whether it's meditating or going for a walk or whatever, but just some time alone, just to stop thinking about stuff, stop worrying about stuff, stop, just to let your mind just relax, or your body, or whatever, go get a massage or whatever. But I didn't allow myself any of that, or much of that. There were things that I did do. I mean, when he was in treatment, in Salt Lake, the doctor had prescribed ballroom dance lessons. It was my idea, but he needed therapy, for balance and coordination and stuff. And she knew a dance studio and instructor and stuff. So she prescribed ballroom dance lessons, much to his chagrin. He did not like to dance. But so when he was getting treatment, then I would go take dance lessons myself, and I loved it. I mean, I think that was a really, really good thing for me, because caregiving is not it's physically demanding, but not in the right way, and so to do something physical that was fun was really good for me, and it's something that I'd always wanted to do. And I could forget about everything, because it kind of occupied my whole brain to learn, these new steps and stuff. It occupied my whole mind so that I could just be free from all of that other stuff for a while. And I did that. And the same thing with the painting cowboy boots. There's something about it, and I know it sounds funny, but until you've got a pair of cowboy boots and you sat down and you, with a paintbrush and some paint, and you started painting on them, you'll know what I mean. But there's something about that where it's just enough that it can take all of this stuff and just set it aside for a while, and just occupy your, the good part of your brain.
Yeah.
So I did do some things, and working on the books with Reid, doing something exciting like that, different, creative. I mean, anything creative was helpful for me. Spending time with my girlfriends, like going to lunch, that was huge. I mean, some of them, they'd already been in my shoes. They'd lost a husband, before they knew what I was going through. They could understand. They just let me, talk. And I knew they knew where I was and what I was going through. So those were things that I did do well.
Yeah.
And I did allow myself.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's all really important when you're talking about, keeping yourself fueled so that you can continue to show up your best for the other people, and also not compound all of your own stuff. I imagine, like, I know for me, all the stress and all of just the emotional part about having to change roles with my grandma, right? Like, where I had to become more like a parent and say, no, this is unacceptable because you're going to hurt yourself. Like, that is emotionally painful to go through that process. Like, you're grieving them before they're even gone. Right. And so to have that space and those friends and those activities where you can just go and kind of say, and get real about the pain of it, like, this really sucks, because if you don't do that while you're in it, then when they're gone, you have to deal with all of that, right? Like, it's hard. So,
like the husband, Reid, the husband, never came home from the hospital with me. I took him there. but he never came home with me, and I never saw him again. That was really, really hard, because then I became in charge of everything. You know, I had to do all the stuff that he used to do and take responsibility for both our lives together. And yeah, it was, so that part of the relationship was definitely, you know, missing. And there's no replacement for that, you know. But the other thing that, and I really, before we wrap this up, I really want to make this point, is that he was focused on a cure. And when he didn't see the cure coming, he kind of gave up hope. But I remember having this conversation with him. I said, you need to see through it. You need to see through the cure. And what is your life going to look like on the other side when you are cured? Because the cure is not the end. We're in a process here. We're on a life journey, right? And we are not just arriving at the cure and then going, oh, now what do we do? You know, because we have to keep going past your cure. So let's look at your life and look through your cure. Well, I could do the same thing, because, and I would offer this to other caregivers, is that you kind of feel like, if I can just get through this, it'll be over, I'll be fine. But you really need to prepare to go through it, and you need to keep your life going so that you can continue on. Because when you get to there, when, like, for me, when he died, it's like, now what? Yeah. You know, it's like, I didn't have anything really to carry me through that. I let all of that go, you know, and so I had to go back and pick it all up again. Of course, I have my grandkids, which, I mean, they're probably my kids and my grandkids to keep me going. But I don't know if I'm making it clear, but you got to have the mindset of, you know, preparing for the long haul, because what you're doing can't sustain you through the long haul, you need to change something, because you don't know. I didn't know it was going to take 5 years. It could have took 10 years, you know, to get to that point. But I did not have sustaining kinds of things going, enough of them. I would have burned out. Yeah. And I was almost burnt out by the end of 5 years. So you have to keep, you know, you have to see through that. You have to focus, project your life through that, instead of just looking at the destination, because we never have a destination. We never just get to a place and then stay there. Right. You know, our life keeps going, and it keeps changing, and and you never know what's around the corner. And that's now what I love about life, is that I never know what's around the corner, and I'm not scared about what it is around the corner, because I don't think it's going to be a boogeyman or a monster or something horrible. I'm always excited to see what's around the next corner. But a lot of us are afraid to see what's around the next corner, and we would just like to stay in our little safe, you know, in our little safe place, and not, you know, have to deal with anything big or bad or scary. But so many wonderful things are out there, and I know that now. So I wish that I could have, you know, somehow convinced him of that, but it didn't happen that way. So
yeah, but
it was his journey, and
yeah. And what I love is that you because we worked on the book past the time of his passing, you know, I got to watch you do that, like start picking up the little pieces of yourself that you left, you know, going back to your horses, going into some self-development spaces that really inspired your dream for the ranch, and all of that stuff just adds up. So I really, really want to encourage the people listening, pick up this book. It's truly life-changing, especially if you're a caregiver. It'll help you to see how just the tiniest little things that you could do could make so many things so much better. So I feel like we could keep talking for another hour, but our time is up. But thank you so much for being here and sharing your story and telling your truth. And I want to thank our listeners for joining us. Of course, I'd always love to hear what you're taking away from this conversation. And I want to give everyone a reminder that our sponsor, Site Chisel, is offering a 10% discount to my listeners with the code Mindful10. So with that, I'm going to call it a wrap. And thank you again, Laura.
Thank you. It was fun.